Hello everyone. So today let's start with a new chapter, that is anatomy of flowering plants. Okay? Chapter number 6. So when we are talking about flowering plants, so definitely we know we will consider the angiosperms, isn't it? Around us, which shows flowers. So earlier we have discussed about the morphology, isn't it? So there we have seen what are the different types of root, stem, leaf modifications, isn't it? So now let's study about the internal tissue systems. So the study of the internal structures, that is known as anatomy. So when we are doing a practical or we are doing a sectioning in the laboratory, then what happen? We often dissect the particular tissues, isn't it? And then whatever we observe, that is our anatomical sections. So the study of the internal organs is considered as anatomy. And the study of tissues, their composition, structures, organization, etc., this includes the histology part. Now, when we are studying anatomy, so definitely there are some important factors, isn't it, for why we are studying anatomy. So let us discuss what are the main importance of studying anatomy. First, it gives us the information about the internal structures of different parts of the plant. Okay. Secondly, the simplicity, complexity of structures. When we are studying about the tissue system, definitely we will come across whether they are simple structures or compounds, complex structures. Okay. Their homology, analogy, if they resemble to some particular parts of the plant, to some other plants. So all that things we come across. Then anatomical studies, it also establishes the group of affinity and establishment of the identities. Okay, we can find any similarity, dissimilarity between different groups of plants. Then forensic science studies plant anatomy to identify plant remnants. Then adulteration and contamination of species, okay, can be detected through anatomical examination. Then wood anatomy, it is used for developing proper grains. Okay. Then on the basis of this, the wood is used variously for cabinet work. It can be known which type of wood is used for what purpose, isn't it? So it helps us to study about the different structural modifications in response to environmental conditions. And moreover, pharmacology and science of natural drugs, these are also related to the study of anatomy of the flowering plants. So these are all the important points why we have to study anatomy. Now the plant tissue, it was actually first of all coined by N. Grew. That means the term tissue in plant anatomy was coined by N. Grew in the year 1682. Okay. There he studied about the different types of tissues present in the plant, and based on the different types of tissues, he observed that basically the plant consists of two types of tissues. Okay. The meristematic tissue and the permanent tissue. The meristematic tissue means the tissues which are actively dividing, and permanent tissue, that means the tissues which have lost their capability of division. Okay. Now let's see a line diagram. So here you can see the tissues, they are basically divided into two groups: meristematic, which undergo division, and permanent, which do not further divide. Okay. Then permanent tissues are again divided into simple permanent tissue, complex permanent tissue. Simple permanent tissue are subdivided into parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma tissues. Sclerenchyma again divided into fibers and sclerates, and complex tissue into xylem and phloem. So before going into details about the permanent tissue, let us first discuss about the meristematic tissue. That means it is the simple plant tissue which has thin walls and are capable of constantly dividing. The main character or the main significance of meristematic tissue is that they are actively dividing tissues. Okay. Sometimes what happened, this term was also coined by Nageli himself. Okay. In early embryonal cells, the cells divide and redivide and form a mass of tissue that is known as the mass meristem. Okay, and when the growth goes on further by these mass meristem, then we call it as the diffused growth. Now, the meristematic cells are basically characterized by small and thin walls. They are round or polygonal cells, compactly arranged without intercellular spaces. Okay, nucleus is large. They have a central vacuole is absent. Their cytoplasm is dense. Then plastids are also absent here. Endoplasmic reticulum is simple. Lots of ribosomes are present. Mitochondria is also abundant. Reserve food is little, but food supply is quite high. So plus biosynthetic activity is high, and most importantly, they can divide repeatedly, and hence they are responsible for the growth of the particular parts of the plant. Okay. Now, based on the position, meristematic tissues can be divided into basically two different types. So based on origin, meristematic tissues are of two types. One is called the primary meristem and other is called the secondary meristem. Primary meristem means they are derived either from the meristematic tissues. Okay. Now they can be apical meristem, intercalary meristem, based on which portion they are present. Okay. Then secondary meristem means they are formed secondarily from the permanent cells. Okay. So like vascular cambiums, interfascicular cambiums, these are considered under the secondary meristem. So based on the origin, meristematic tissues can be either primary meristem or secondary meristem. Again, based upon the position of the meristematic tissue where they are present, it can be of three types. Apical meristem, that means the meristem which is present in the growing point, apex, either of shoot, root or their branches. Okay. Now, these cells are actively dividing and they are responsible for the longitudinal growth of the plant. Now, the apical meristem, they are either promeristem, undifferentiated part, or they may be differentiated ones. Okay, partially differentiated meristem, which lies just below the lateral and initial ones. Now, here the tissues get differentiated into dermatogen, peribulum and plerome portion. Then second one is the intercalary meristem. Intercalary meristem, as you can see, these are the intercalary meristems. Okay, that means they are left out parts of apical meristem, which comes to lie between the areas of permanent tissue above the nodes. Okay, either they are present above the or below the nodes or at the leaf base portion. So they are the intercalary meristem. And third one is the lateral meristem. As you can see, these are the lateral meristematic tissue which occur parallel to the circumference of the organ in which they develop, and they are responsible for increasing the girth of the cell, that means thickness of the particular plant. So apical meristem, longitudinal growth, lateral meristem for girth, and these are responsible for development of leaves and branches. Okay, so these are the different types of meristematic tissue based on the position. Again, based on their activity, meristematic cells can be again divided into mass meristem. That means which actively divide, which is found in early embryos, constant division. So they are called mass meristem. Promeristem, undifferentiated apical meristems. Okay, protoderm, outer cell layer of apical meristem. Procambium, which are derivatives of apical meristem. Ground meristem, which are formed from the apical meristem, which produce the tissues of epidermis and vascular tissues. Peripheral or flank meristem, formed from corpus initials. Rib meristem, centrally placed in the parallel files. Okay, then plate meristem, they are layered meristem which cell divides, and usually they lie perpendicular to the surface of the common flats. So these are the different types based on the activity of the meristem. Now, after studying about all these, we come to the shoot apical meristem, which is also called the SAM in short form. Okay, so this is the vegetative shoot apex where the growth takes place maximum. Okay, it occurs inside the terminal and axillary buds where it is protected by the leaf primordias. Now actually what happened, this particular region, it has area, it has three regions. Okay, so one is called the central zone, which is a group of infrequently dividing cells present in the center. Peripheral zone, which occurs on the flanks. The cells are also dense, have dense cytoplasm, they divide frequently. And the rib zone, which occurs below the central zone. So here the cells will divide internally repeatedly, and they will develop the different parts of the shoot. Okay, the active vegetative shoot apex, it's formed due to this activity of this apical meristematic tissues. Number of leaf primordias also develop, they broaden and finally develops into different leaves. And the period between the initiation of two successive leaf primordia is called the plastocorn. Okay, and the term phytometer or the stem unit is used for the node or internode, leaf and axillary bud. So based on this, or while studying the shoot apical meristem, we come across two important theories. One is called the tunica corpus theory. Okay, tunica corpus theory, that means it was first of all given by Smith, and according to this theory, the vegetative shoot apex, it has two parts. So as you can see in the diagram, this is the tunica corpus theory vegetative shoot apex. Okay, so it has two parts, the tunica outer layer and the corpus inner one. Tunica is commonly single layered. Here the cells are small, so the outer layer, which you can see single layer, this is the tunica, and the inner part is the corpus. They undergo anticlinal divisions and produce the epidermis. Okay, the tunica portion, they form the epidermis, and the outer layer that forms the epidermis, and the inner one, it divides to form the cortex and other parts of the tissue. Okay, so here actually ground meristem is formed from the tissues like hypodermis, cortex is formed, pith, pericycle, all these things are formed. So as you can see in the diagram itself, this is the tunica which is forming the outer epidermis. Okay, and the corpus which will divide and redivide to form the other tissues of the plant. The second theory is the histogen theory, and according to this theory, it was proposed by Hanstein. The promeristem of the vegetative shoot apex, it produces three types of meristematic zones. Okay, called the histogens. They are dermatogens, peribulum and plerome. The dermatogen, which is responsible for formation of the outer layer epidermis. Okay, this line, as you can see, this is the dermatogen. The next one is the peribulum, which is responsible for development of cortex, hypodermis, endodermis, and plerome, which is the central zone. It is responsible for formation of the vascular tissues. Okay, so histogen theory says that, or proposes that, there are three layers: dermatogen, peribulum and plerome, and tunica corpus says that there are two layers, the tunica and the corpus. So these are the two theories important related to the shoot apical meristem portion. Then next we come to the root apical meristem. So when we are discussing about the root apical meristem, so you can see here the diagram. It actually occurs subterminally at the tips of the main root and its branches. So here also in adventitious roots, root apex is formed from secondarily by the meristematic cells, their activity. This portion consists of the meristematic cells which repeatedly divide and is responsible for the growth of the root. So in the diagram you can see this is the root cap portion, this is the quiescent center. Okay, then here the outer layer, that is calyptrogen is present, dermatogen, root apical meristem, these tissues are called. Okay, like you can see the labeling portion properly. Then so these cells, they repeatedly divide and ultimately they are responsible for the growth of the particular root. Now in the root apical meristem, we actually find 5 components. One is the quiescent center, where division doesn't take place. Columnar initials, okay, which lie directly below the quiescent center. The epidermal lateral root cap initials, cortical endodermal initials, and the stele initials, that is the vascular portion. Now the meristematic cells, as we are telling that they are responsible for constant division, so as they are constantly dividing, so definitely they are responsible for the growth of the particular plants, isn't it? Whether it is leaf, branch, root, shoot, whatever it is, so that particular portion growth is basically dependent on this meristematic tissues, which are always present in the apical portions, mainly apical portions. Okay. Then intercalary meristem, which will be responsible for protecting the plants from lodging, internodal length, okay, growth. Lateral meristem for the girth of the plant. Then root apices, which will constantly add tissues, root hairs to the root, okay. Vascular cambiums, which are responsible for secondary growth. So all these things are the important functions of the meristematic tissue. So when we are studying about meristematic tissue, always remember this is the most important part, because these cells are young cells, actively dividing cells, and basically these are the cells which are responsible for the growth of the plants. Okay. So different types you have to remember based on their origin, position and activity, their function. Then the theories of the shoot apical meristem, tunica corpus theory, and the histogen theory, and the root apical meristem, the 5 components. So hope this video is clear to you all. Go through it properly, go through the books. If you have any problem, let me know.